This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a very long time. It's about something we don't talk about enough, and not because it isn't there, but because we've learned to carry it quietly. It's about mental health and about what it actually feels like to live well, not just to look like you're doing well. And I'm joined today by someone I really admire, Dr. Klodiana Nela. She is a lead consultant psychiatrist whose work spans ADHD, autism, and the full breadth of mental health care in the NHS. You're also a Leaders Plus NHS Fellow, a Royal College of Psychiatrists National Autism Fellow, and someone who has spent her career inside the everyday realities of people's struggle. Yours is honestly a voice that we don't get to hear nearly enough in conversations like this. And between us, we'll talk about pride and pressure, about silence and ambition, about what asking for help actually looks like, especially for people who grew up being told to be strong. If any of this resonates with you, I hope you stay with us today.
Thank you. First and above all, I'll say thank you. I am impressed that you actually did look at my bio and my CV. It's interesting how one feels when someone else reads them out. It sort of almost made me realize that I've done all of this. So thank you very much for that.
It's a pleasure having you here.
I was going to say something about when you said a voice that we don't hear. That is actually very interesting. And I would agree with you on that. I do follow our media as well. And whenever there is something going on in Albania, there's hardly, if ever, a psychiatrist being invited. It seemed to be somehow sidelined, I suppose. There is a lot of psychologists, and there's a little bit of a trend about that. But I don't hear so much about psychiatrists. So I agree with you. It is important to talk about those issues.
Let's get into it. I don't think the biggest challenge in our community is a lack of ambition, if we are to consider that. I think we've normalized pressure to the point where we've just stopped noticing it. From the outside, a lot of people look like they're doing well, but that doesn't always match how they actually feel on a Tuesday afternoon, let's say. Do you think that people are actually coping, or have we just got very good at functioning under strain?
Thank you. Sorry, may I say you have a beautiful name? Because you're asking a psychiatrist, I do want to distinguish here actual mental illness and difficulties with how one feels on an everyday basis. I think obviously mental illness carries a lot of stigma, and perhaps what one imagines is mental illness is not necessarily the ones that I will treat and deal with. So, because, like you mentioned at the very beginning, I work as a psychiatrist, I would see the most unwell one because it's tertiary service. So, there is sort of layers to it. But I suppose we can talk more about it at the end, because the purpose of this discussion would also be to make our community aware how to access those services and how to best sort of look after themselves. But I suppose you wanted to sort of distinguish between also our community and the rest of the communities here, or English community. Yes, of course. I mean, we would have to think about it in a historical context as well. We had lots of trauma in our background, a lot of history that we still carry through, apart from the immigration, which is the part that where we belong, and obviously the repercussions of it would be our children and the other generation behind us. We also have a lot of trauma and history before that that would have contributed to how those illnesses would present in our community. A lot of it would have been sort of normalized. However, that would also differ where you live. So our community in England, as a comparison to obviously the other communities in England. And nowadays, psychiatry is seen as a biopsychosocial cycle. And that in itself tells you why it's called like this. I don't know how much you know about it, but historically there have been a lot of changes also in the country we live in. So, for example, in the past, psychiatry wasn't so much recognized. There was then the School of Psychiatry, and also the trend does change. But all in all, now we've recognized that model whereby we think, obviously, the psychiatrist is the biological component, so to say, because it's the medication that we treat it with, the psychological component, which would be the psychologist, and we look into the kind of other aspects of care, and the social aspect, which is really the one that differs people who live in big cities or town and the ones who live in a small village, so to say, because of the level of support that they get or not, the housing issues, the level of noise, and so on and so forth. So, to answer your questions, are we able to normalize it?
Are we actually coping, or we're just
Or are
good?
we just coping? Um, I think all in all, we are getting better at recognizing it. For example, there is as you mentioned at the beginning in my titles and so forth, there is a big movement to recognize ADHD and autism nowadays, to the extent that there are separate services for those. There is a lot of funding for those, also additional trainings and so on. So in a way, we have been, and when I say we, I'm talking about here where we work. Uh, so we are recognizing it better, we are diagnosing it better, but are we helping in a better way? That's a different question, because
That's true.
again, the services are young and they don't have so much funding in it to cover everything. But in terms of our community, perhaps although I have all those qualifications that you mentioned, perhaps I'm not the best person to answer it, because actually I haven't come across a lot of our own people, so to say, that
That's
I treat.
interesting.
It's very, very rare. That might have been because of demographics of where I worked.
Yeah.
It might have been because they don't present, as you said. Certainly, it carries a lot of stigma and shame. However, in saying that, when I go back home, I do get a lot of patients additionally on my holiday. So the trend is on the grow. People are suffering more. They are coming forward to kind of, seek advice and help more than before. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because also the numbers are smaller. We are a small community in the end. So it's hard to say.
So basically, because there's such little data at the moment, it's actually hard to understand if they're coping on the
Absolutely.
routine or they're actually coping with it. Also, because I understand a lot don't reach out.
Absolutely. That is a good point, because there is data and research carried for immigration, sort of compared to kind of the normal
Yeah.
population. And they are at greater risk of developing mental illnesses, but that was carried out for the Caribbean and Afro American population. So not so much about Eastern European, especially. And when we talk about Albanians, I suppose we have to also, distinguish between our part of Albanians in Kosovo, who had, even more traumatic recent history. Although our trauma sort of it goes hand in hand, so it only changed in years.
100%. When we talk about identity, when we're talking about Kosovo Albania, which we call it all Albania anyways,
Of
I
course,
think when I was thinking about the question to ask you today, it came to my mind a quote by Ismail Kadare who goes, Sa më shumë e njoh popullin tim, aq më shumë ndjej krenari dhe dhimbje. And I kind of understood it, and I thought to bring it up because there's a lot of pride in being Albanian, especially when you see how far people have come
absolutely.
since our history as well. Um, but the pride itself carries a weight, the weight of not falling behind. And for those of us born outside Albania, that weight shows up differently. We didn't live our parents' story directly, but we still feel responsible for making it worth it. When you sit with people who are carrying this kind of pride and pressure together, how does it actually show up? And how do you tell the difference between someone who's just very driven and someone who's quietly running on empty, I'd say?
That is a very interesting question, and something that I've reflected on a lot in my life. That's because of my journey. So I left Albania when it was really at the lowest, perhaps, point, and we had to. Perhaps that's another question that I'm answering straight away. So if it was now, perhaps I wouldn't have left. But yeah, so I have reflected on this a lot. So I have traveled the world, not just traveling it, but also for the purpose of living in different parts of the world, even across the ocean. And I think I've definitely decided the best thing to do is actually embrace what you are. That's because you can't change it. Whatever it is, you cannot change it. It's better to embrace it the way it is, with the reality of what it is, what it carries, the good in it, the bed's in it, but it's you and it's the truth. Instead of hiding behind another identity, obviously we've been naturalized and we carry different passports and we live in different countries and so on. But the genetic component and the way we were brought up and the history that we carry with us, this will never leave us. So it's also it's part of us. We develop in such a way that becomes integrated within us. So I think that would have been my advice if we're talking about identity. And in terms of what Kader has been talking about, I mean, the way I take it is that comes also with age and the more you know. So the more you know, and that's like love, so to say. So the further away you are, the more you love. You know, the more distance you put, the more you kind of remember that psychological component.
With anything, I'd
The more
say.
you remember the good parts of it, and we have a lot to celebrate. We have a lot to celebrate. You know, not, we are quite old in the region, if not the eldest. We have a lot of talent. We have music. We have tradition. We have lots of other artistic qualities, but not only qualities. Sorry. A lot of us have become scientists and so on. We have contributed in other parts of the world, not to mention the dancing skills and so on.
But circling back to it, actually, what is it in your opinion that differentiates who actually is very driven, as I was saying, or someone who's just like doing it because that's all they know?
Well, let me tell you this. It takes a lot of training and skills, and it isn't that difficult once you're trained. It's a long journey to become a specialist. It's almost like a template. So you learn to distinguish this. But I think, I'm pretty sure you refer mostly to people who get tired and stressed and overwhelmed with the pressures of today's. When one is unwell, trust me, they cannot avoid being seen. You come to a point when you need to be seen. Now, if we're talking about how early and how specific you want to get about this, I can tell you about psychosis if you want. So psychotic illnesses is the one that we need to target early, because the treatment is there, and the sooner you get treatment, the better is the outcome. The more episodes you have that last longer, the worse is the outcome. So that in itself tells you that is, best to present yourself. I suppose nowadays, because of where we live, there has been quite a drive about, even the royals have been involved to kind of promote it. And it's been everywhere, it's been in the media, and people have been presenting. So I think that kind of diminishes the stigma a little bit. I suppose the best way to answer this is that we ought to do more,
Yeah.
that we can think together how we can do more. I have been a little bit more engaged recently with our community, with those forums such as UKAP and UCAMS and so on. Although life is so such that it doesn't allow you a lot of time to do that, it's also important that we do a little bit of that on the side to kind of raise the awareness and perhaps signpost them at least to where they can go and where they can find the help. And that's what I've been doing, because obviously it's not possible to treat everybody, but to at least recognize and signpost whoever needs the treatment or not is important, and where the services are. And sometimes they're quite, I think, also another barrier is the fact that they are worried if they're covered under NHS or not, if they can present to the National Health Service places. So if anybody is hearing this podcast, yes, the answer is yes, so that you're 100% sure that if you are unwell, no one's going to check on this first. They will treat you. They will look after you.
That's true. Linking back to you having lived in different countries and having a lot of people listening today, having lived abroad most of their life, I wanted to touch on the topic of immigration. So we all know that building a life in a new country brings opportunity. That's set in stone. But it also brings a kind of uncertainty that we rarely talk about. And the second generation doesn't escape it. We grow up around it, and it shapes how we think, how we handle stress, and even how we define success.
Not only they can't escape it, but they carry the bigger risk than the first generation. One study shows that perhaps is that clash of cultures, that what they find outside is different to what they find inside. So they are the generation who has the bigger risk compared to the first generation in terms of mental illnesses.
And when someone, as you said, carries that weight, that kind of long pressure for years, what does it do to them? And how do we spot in the people we love? So in this situation is like, how am I able as Zoya, who's not trained, able to recognize it when they're trying to not say anything, basically?
I think, Zoya, we have to distinguish a little bit. What do we want to target? Because mental illness is a big umbrella. So one has a mental illness. When that particular person, for whatever is happening, they're not able to carry through their normal tasks, their day-to-day activities. This is when it's a red flag. Okay? So how one copes differs. We have different support systems, we have different backgrounds, different resilience, different genetics, obviously different habits. So if one takes other substances or alcohol and so on and so forth, doesn't eat well, nutrition, doesn't drink well, this will all play a part. Age, what age, sex, male, female, all of this will play a part. But generally speaking, so if I gave you a very, very broad, simple example, the same trauma for two different people will be presenting differently. So the one who's able to go to work obviously has got the trauma, but they're still maintaining that normality, whereas the other isn't. So this is where that someone will need help to see if they need further help, support them. When people are at their lowest, they struggle the most with communication. They cut their communication. This is a very obvious, apparent, problem. So if a friend or family person can make that phone call, make a GP appointment, that is the first step.
Nice.
Now, people become extremely unwell, so to say. We can still help, but that would be the extreme cases where we can use mental health act assessments. So, we can go to people's homes as well and see for ourselves. So there is mechanisms in place, but I think the first port of call would be the GP. Obviously, out of hours would be the A&E. There is also, depending on where you live, there is also a lot of help otherwise, like Samaritans and 24-hour crisis line and so when they present to the mental health professionals, they will give them a list of those places where to go and how to help themselves. When we talk about mental illness, I think something that gets sort of sidelined a little bit is also personality disorders, which sort of falls neither here nor there. It is under the mental health, but it's even more difficult to treat. Not so much in our community, because I think that's something that perhaps I'm not summarizing it well, but it might come with luxury. We haven't even sorted our basic problems, so it's difficult to be that big a percentage of our community presenting with personality disorders, but obviously they are there alongside or dual diagnoses and so on. But for those who do suffer from that, there are services. But it's about recognizing when someone cannot function. If we're talking about depression, when it goes really bad, we're talking about self-care. One doesn't wash, one doesn't eat, doesn't walk, or doesn't enjoy the things that they used to commonly enjoy before.
100%. So what I'm taking out of this is, if I notice something I want to try and understand for a loved one, is to understand if they changed in their communication, in their habits and their passions as well. And then obviously you explored all the bits that I can do in my position to try and help out them.
And I think if in doubt, always best to try and seek for help. There's nothing to lose. If the professional thinks there's nothing wrong, so be it. It's even better.
If we were to consider focus on the Albanian group, I think we have a big chunk of, let's say, just be strong and get on with it. I think a lot of us were raised with that in our mind, and it served us in some ways, but it also means a lot goes unsaid. What happens to a person who holds it all in for years, and are we quietly handing that same script to the next generation?
Well, like I said, it definitely carries some weight, because the longer that you leave it, your resources will finish. They will deplete your energy, your coping mechanisms will come to an end eventually. So the sooner you come forward, the better. There is 24 hours help with mental health, and those assessments are 24 hours, same way as any other health issue that you would present with. So the answer is yes, it shouldn't be going unrecognized. And I'm sure someone who lives with that somebody will know when it comes to a point that they really ought to present. It's also, there is some signs that can be even seen, like they don't make good eye contact, they don't look at you. There is a lot of subtle signs.
I think we're highlighting the importance of our presence around the people we love and how much we can do and be there for them. But what do you think about handing the same script that we have in our minds to the next generation? Do you think we can stop it? Can we prevent it?
We can definitely help. I'm not sure if you can completely prevent it, but we can help. And in that way, the numbers would be less of people who become unwell. And also, we can help in the severity of the presentation and of the illness, or how long will they be unwell. So, definitely, yes, because we are designed, by our genes, by, as you said, even our presentations being immigrants or being second generation immigrants or our social circumstances. We can't suddenly change that sometimes, can we? So by raising awareness and putting more support in place, we can certainly help to decrease the numbers. That goes for all the communities, but I suppose more so for ours, because I think more needs to be done, generally speaking. And here I would think about our own country as well, Albania. So more needs to be done there as well as for our community here. Because don't forget, most of us live actually there. And with the pressures that have increased over there, with financial difficulties and all the other difficulties, which are not becoming any better, that help isn't there either.
Well, I agree with you. And there's one thing, what I see, and I think myself, I might be wrong, but what I'm trying to say is people who have moved away from Albania have kind of lost the timeline of progression that is happening in Albania as well.
Yes.
So a lot of people that live outside of Albania have been kind of stuck with the old version of our culture, our identity, and there's like a big bridge at the moment where people can't cross. Albania has succeeded, has gone ahead, whereas we tend to preserve an identity that is no longer part of the modern Albania as well. But there's one thing that I don't think has or will ever change, and that is ambition. Ambition, I think, is a beautiful part of our culture. But somewhere along the way, exhaustion becomes a sign that we're doing it right. There's a voice that keeps a lot of us going. For some, it sounds like I've come too far to stop now. And if we were to think as second generation Albanians, personally myself, I'd think, okay, my parents have passed too much to actually afford to slow down. What do you think are the actual signs of burning out? Or even when they look completely fine on the outside again?
Like I said, you'd obviously notice the change in the person, the change in their activities, losing that desire to actually connect socially, maybe whatever they liked before. I think we need, alongside raising awareness, is about talking about lifestyle, how that impacts on our ability to perform. And it's a cost effective project. So, in order for us to be able to perform well, we also have to fuel ourselves, so to say, with everything, with food, water, rest, love, enjoyment, all of it.
I think us as Albanians, we find it difficult to draw the line where we're actually burned out and we kind of pressure ourselves to actually carry on.
Well, let me help you with this. I don't think it's specific to Albanians. It is difficult. I suppose because being a smaller community, always wanted to kind of, be noticed, be seen. And also because of the fact that we're a small community, we don't have a lot of support from each other. So I think perhaps we need to kind of triple our energy to get to where another person from another community would have been able to achieve. I think we're getting better because by creating those communities and space to talk and actually connect with each other, then we support each other by giving the information. Information is the key element here. At the right time, at the right place, about the right application, it is the key.
And talking about actually linking directly to this that you're saying, I think asking for help nowadays is still something we hesitate to do. Like we were saying, a beginning conversation like this don't happen as often. We don't hear about all
No.
these things often. And sometimes it's stigma. Sometimes it's
Yes.
simply
Most of
not
the
knowing what help looks like, as you were saying. In your experience, what is it that actually stops people from reaching out?
It's interesting you say it is a lot to do with stigma and the perception of mental illnesses. I think we do need to, like I said, raise more awareness, have more structures in place. So if we grow as a community, if we have links that we can support people better to signpost them and underline, what they need to do, then that would be would be very, very important. Hence why they'll be more likely to approach a psychologist than a psychiatrist because of the stigma that it carries. So perhaps when you see the psychiatrist, like I mentioned before, you are more unwell by definition. So the psychiatrist is the one who kind of oversees the whole care and would suggest what therapies would one benefit from. So it is important, to kind of raise that awareness. And also, most of the time, what I've noticed when they approach me and I give all that energy and information trying to support them, most of the time, again, it hits another wall. They don't want the
Accept it.
medication. What they want to hear is that they're not unwell. So it is still tricky with mental illness. It's not something that is accepted, easily, so to say. So yes, and so I've had cases, where I've tried to help and I've suggested therapy and treatment, and then nothing happened. And then they approach me again and again. I've helped them, trying to give them the right treatment. They take it for a short period of time, so they don't follow this advice through. So this is where, again, more work needs to be done, because unfortunately, just by listening to the problem is not going to eventually help if you don't take the treatment that the doctor would prescribe for you.
100%. And if I am to think about a practical reality, most people can't really just pause everything. There's like work, family, bills, expectations. And so look after your mental health has to mean something practical, something that you can actually do on a normal day. For the people you worked with, what has genuinely helped when things felt overwhelming? And for someone who is listening right now, who feels like they're just about coping, what is one realistic first step that you'd suggest?
Absolutely. We all need support. As part of our job, we have supervision. Every week there is a play or reflective practice. Every week we can go and talk about those difficult cases, talk about the emotions that we would experience because of what we've just seen. So, or it's very important to have that forum to discuss. So, in more general context, of course, again, talking about your problem, bringing it up, even if it's not the right place, if it's a friend, still good. The friend then can raise that awareness and try and, like I said, take them to the right place. You can't self-refer yourself to psychiatrists. You have to,
Of course.
unless it's private, obviously.
Yeah.
But a psychologist, yes, you can self-refer. Again, there is no harm in that.
What I'm thinking while listening to you is the next question I'd like to ask you. How much do you think belonging matters in this? What does it do for someone to feel surrounded by people who just get it without
Enormous.
explaining?
One word, enormous.
What
That support is the most important thing in the whole picture. That support, that the thing that we could create as a community to help others, it's incredible. That is the biggest help we can give somebody, because it will be a place where they can feel free to come and express their difficulties or whatever that. And sometimes it could be a simple matter. So because we carry all this wealth and all this knowledge together, we might be able to just direct them depending on the issue. It might be something that will take it off their chest. It might be something that takes off their shoulders, depending on what they think is the problem. And there might be a solution, but people don't know. And also historically, not just Albanians, people tend to stay within themselves. Have you noticed within yourself when you come across a similar problem that someone else had, you'll be like, oh, I thought it's just me who had that. So you had the same problem. So creating those groups where they can find themselves and where to go with the question, but coming to closer to you where you are, your friends, your family, people at work.
what can organizations like UKAP do to make sure everyone feels included like that? We've touched on friends, family, but if we were to think about groups like UKAP, let's say.
Well, you are already doing the right thing. You're trying to raise awareness. You're trying to have that podcast. You'll have probably more activities that will link us together. I did attend another, again, organized by UKAP, which was in sort of links with UCAMs. It was Neuroscience Day where we came and presented what this is about, you know. Yes, and what I think linking with what you have been trying to say all along today, with the ambition and so on, I think as a community, we do operate single-handedly a little bit. And this is my aim and my dream, not to operate like that. If I had other Albanians in my team, it would be a very good thing for the community. That would show the level of commitment that we have to the community, and the level of engagement, and the level of interlinks that we are creating. Otherwise, we are very isolated, unfortunately. So there might be, I'm not sure how many, there will be a few, but they'll be all sort of scattered and we don't link very well with each other. So I'll give you an example. So, for example, the aim of that evening was to perhaps help younger generation who wants to become a psychiatrist. That would be a great help. They can come and shadow you. You can tell them what is the profession actually about, because they may not like it. They think they do, but they don't. And that if they really do want it or like it, then you can show them the steps how to become. That's the most important information, because you might be doing 10 other things. Like you said, we are very ambitious, we get burned out and so on. That's because you're doing 10 other things which you think are good. It might be even a master's, but it won't help you to get where you want to get. So having the key information is the important thing here. And I really urge our Albanians to actually give that information, because I think initially, because we were kind of operating a little bit separated from each other, not having that experience how it is to be, because I'm talking about, so we were kind of the first ones to land. I think we also were scared of that competition, so not giving each other that information, thinking it's going to stop me. But guess what? It doesn't. There's space for everybody. There's room for a lot of us, because this country is huge and it's got great opportunities. I think England has welcomed a lot of us, has given us a lot of opportunities. And I'm pretty certain when I applied for those roles, there was no discrimination. The application was the same as it was for everybody else. What we need to do is strengthen those links, depthen this community of ours, integrate it further into this English community.
Agreed. I think for me personally, being part of UKAP has made realize how much Albanians actually love to help each other, and how many professionals like yourself make themselves available for students, for the community itself. And it's just great to see. And I think this is where a community like UKAP actually matters. We talk a lot about success and growth, but holding space for each other is part of that too. Exactly what we're trying to talk about now. And I think there's something powerful about being around people that just get it without you having to really explain. There's a line by Nas that captures it better than I can, and I actually noted it down and I was going to read it. It goes, tell your story, shout it, write it, whisper if you have to, but tell it. Some won't understand it, some will outright reject it, but many will thank you for it. And then the most magical thing will happen. One by one, voices will start whispering, me too, and your tribe will gather and you will never feel alone again. And that's really what UCAP is to me.
I feel emotional, actually.
I'm not a great reader, so I hope.
It's so true. It is so true. This will resonate. This will resonate with others. I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a lot of talk about energy nowadays, as in what one brings into the room. Positive energy, negative energy, there is energy, there isn't energy, or I like your energy. Have you noticed that? It's a trend.
100%. And I think what people need to understand is that there are people out there willing to get to know you, getting to help. Don't be afraid to actually ask and put yourself out there to try.
Absolutely. I think sharing is caring. So share your story, definitely. You might help just one person, but that one is more than enough.
I agreed.
That one you help might help another two, and so on and so forth.
Bamir the Jemir. This is what my mum used to tell me when I was younger all the time. A lot of people listening will recognize pieces of themselves in this, and sometimes that recognition, just knowing you're not the only one, is the thing that actually helps the most. To close, if someone is listening right now, quietly struggling, what would you want them to hear?
I think we covered quite a lot, but most importantly, as we just summarized at the end, is share your story, tell somebody, and then it's for that somebody to try and seek help. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, the most commonly it would be the GP, A&E to present with the first kind of issue. If not, community, friends, whoever notices some changes in them, it will be life-saving. And then obviously last one comes a psychiatrist. Hopefully you don't want to see one. But if it comes to that, don't be afraid. We're professionals. We're there to help. We're there to help. And get that help. Get that help. Nothing can be worse than not getting the help. So even if you get some help and it doesn't sort of improve you 100%, it will help you 20%. Even that is better than nothing.
Agreed. And is what I want to circle back on. You said at the end of the day, just you as in a professional listening to a problem might not fix the problem. But I do think that conversation like this can be a start.
I may need to correct myself. Actually, listening to it does help quite a lot. But what I meant is follow that advice, follow it through. Actually, I was thinking about it Zoe, as we were speaking. Perhaps there's a stigma about going to pharmacy and getting, buying these medications as well.
Could be that as well, actually. You never know. But I don't. I
I've
think we
got an advice about this. We're talking about Albania because you obviously people don't know you can go anywhere. But if you
Yeah,
live in Albania, go to the I don't know, number 7 pharmacy, not number 9. Change the pharmacy where you get the medication from so that they don't recognize you.
true. So our advice is start that conversation, speak to someone. As we said, conversations like this don't fix anything on their own, but it's true. But they are a start, and start matter more than we give them credit for. Thank you, Dr. Klodiana. It was a pleasure having you today. Looking forward to seeing you again, and all the best.
Thank you, Zoe. It was actually a great pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.